You're listening to Tonebender's Sound Design Podcast, presented by Sound Ideas. This is the show where we talk with the sonic artists behind our favorite films, games, and series. If you work in sound design, post, or game audio, you already know how much time the right library can save you. For the month of February, get 50% off any Sound Ideas membership tier, no matter which level of access you need. That's half off of the entire professionally recorded sound effects catalog, from cinematic and broadcast to hard-to-find specialty sounds. Just head to sound-ideas.com and use the promo code TONEBENDERS50 at checkout. Hello everyone, welcome to Tonebender's Sound Design Podcast. My name is Tim Muirhead and I will be your host for this episode. I got to sit down with Mark Mangini for a fantastic one-on-one talk about his career, because he is receiving the Lifetime Achievement Award at this year's Motion Picture Sound Editors Golden Reel Awards. To celebrate this, Mark and I got together on the beautiful Stage 6 at Formosa Group in Hollywood. The idea was to take all of the films that Mark has been nominated for at the Golden Reels and discuss his role and memories on each project. This is an ambitious goal, as Mark has been nominated 23 different times. So this talk went on a bit longer than the usual Tonebenders interview, and I've broken it up into two parts. This episode, part one, will cover some of the absolute classics Mark worked on early in his career, like Raiders of the Lost Ark, Poltergeist, Star Trek The Voyage Home, and many, many more. Before we get to the interview, I want to tell everyone listening how they can be a part of the night when Mark gets his Lifetime Achievement Award at the Motion Picture Sound Editors Golden Reel Awards. You can buy your own tickets at mpse.org and be part of the fun while the best-sounding films of last year are celebrated. Comedian Patton Oswalt will be the host, and the legendary producer Kathleen Kennedy will be receiving the Filmmaker Award. The event begins at 3 p.m. on March 8th, with dinner and drinks to follow the awards presentation. Tickets can be purchased from now until February 25th by going to mpse.org. And remember, Motion Picture Sound Editor members get a sweet $150 off their ticket price. If you will be in the Los Angeles area for the awards, consider coming a few days early on Thursday, March 5th, to come to the 4th annual Tonebenders LA Sound Design Meetup, sponsored by the MPSE. This is a great night where you can hang out with old friends and colleagues and hopefully meet a bunch of new ones. Everyone that works in sound for movies, series, and games is welcome and encouraged to come. Last year, we kind of outgrew the previous venue that we've had it at, and now we had to move the event to All Season Brewing for this year. I hope you can all make it. It was a lot of fun last year, even though we were packed in pretty tight. This year should be even better when we have a bit of elbow room. Feel free to tell anyone you think might be interested to come on out. Okay, let's get to part one of my sit-down with Mark Mangini. The idea for today's talk, I've talked to you a bunch of times, but always about a specific project.
Didn't you do one with me about I know I've talked about like Hanna-Barbera and the early days and all that stuff. We didn't do that?
We touched on it a little bit.
Oh, okay.
We've talked about Dune.
Yeah.
We've talked about Fury Road.
Yeah.
We've talked about Goodnight Oppie.
Ah, that's right.
The idea of this one is every year when the MPSE comes out with its Lifetime Achievement Award, I've been interviewing the recipient of it, kind of going back over their career.
For doing that.
Well, congratulations on getting that award. It's one of those things where you're a humble gentleman, so you might not agree with this, but everyone that I talk to has said, he hasn't already got it yet? How's it taken this long?
No, and that's all fine because I don't think about these kinds of things, though. I've actually thought about it. Like, I go to the MPSE Awards every year and I see great people get this award. And I always have thought to myself, I might be a candidate for this, but I'm not ready. And when Dave Barber called me, initially I said no. I thought, I have a career. I got a career. I'm doing really good. For some reason, growing up, I always thought Lifetime Achievement Awards are bestowed upon people who are either dead or retired, and I'm neither. So I at first said no.
Thankfully.
And then I mentioned to my wife at breakfast the next day, because, these guys call me, and I told them, no, I have so much more to do. And she said, you're accepting. And so I called David back and said, I think I'm going to say
You
yes
have to consult your manager. Yeah, exactly. You've been nominated 23 times for an MPSC Golden Reel.
Yeah, and I have 12 of them.
Wow.
Which is amazing.
So what I thought maybe we could do is kind of go through from the beginning and go up and kind of talk about your role on each one and how your jobs have evolved over time.
Do you have that list?
I do have
I don't even know it. But, that's fine.
It starts with a bang with a win in 1981 for Raiders of the Lost Ark, an all-time classic.
Oh my God, that's such a great movie. What a stroke of luck. It so happens that my partner, we had Richard Anderson, Stephen Hunter Flick, both Lifetime Achievement Award winners from the MPSC, and I started a business in 1980, a little sound editing company, and Richard Anderson was a schoolmate of Ben Burt's at USC, and they were like best buddies. And so Steven Spielberg had decided that he wanted to do post in L.A. Even though it was a Lucasfilm production, Steven's Amblin was here, so he wanted to mix here. So Ben decided the best way to do it was to kind of collaborate with Richard and Steven and I, and he'd do some projects at Skywalker. It wasn't Skywalker then. It was Sprocket Systems. And he'd do a quarter of it, and we'd do 3/4 of it, and he'd design some stuff, we'd design some stuff, but we'd mix here. And so that was the way that came about. So here I am. Raiders of the Lost Ark was my third movie.
Wow.
And I am 25 years old. And Ben Burt is what's the... You know, when you have like I play guitar, so like the guitar gods like Jeff Beck and Eric Clapton were I looked up to them like, oh my God, that's another universe. And that to me, like working with Ben Burt felt like that. So I was kind of working in awe while I was on the project.
Do you have any scenes from the movie that you worked on that you recall?
Yeah, well, we divided the movie up co-equally. So I took reels, and that day we were still on film.
Of course.
Editing sound on sprocketed film. So we divided the movie up co-equally. So I took reels 2, 3, and 4. Richard took 1, 5, and 6, and Steven took like 7, 8, and 9 or something like that. And so we edited vertically, as they say, not horizontally. So we did everything within a reel. My sort of big moments were... I had to design the monkey, the Sulla's pet monkey, and I had to do the shootout in the Raven Bar, and I had to do the flight to Nepal. Those were the big action sequences that I had. And those were I could talk forever about designing or working on Raiders of the Lost Ark. The biggest win, my fondest memory of Raiders of the Lost Ark is the challenge of voicing the monkey. So they have a trained capuchin monkey on set that made no sound. But it was always little opening its mouth and sort of shouting as if to say, hey, Nazis, they're over here, because he was going to betray the good guys. And so I had to voice this monkey for 10 minutes. And I started that process by doing what most of us would do, which is go out and record monkeys, like get the raw sound, get fresh sound, and edit it in. And I did that. I went to animal farms and animal trainers and got them to get their monkeys to make sounds for me. And I started editing it in, but the scenes never came to life with the real sounds. And it was one morning, as is usually the case with me, I had this epiphany. I remembered early in my career at Hanna-Barbera, my first job in 1976, my job was to listen to the tapes that came out of the recording studio from the voiceover actors, because as you know, in animation, you record sound first and then you animate to it. And I remember hearing this one guy, every session, he showed up, he's doing his voices, and in between takes, he's literally monkeying around, and he's doing this monkey voice that was extraordinary. And this turned out to be the great Frank Welker, one of the great voiceover artists of our time, arguably Mel Blanc's successor. And I remembered Frank doing this, and I thought, wouldn't it be crazy to bring Frank in to do the voice of the monkey? And so we did. And so I cued the movie for ADR, And we brought Frank into an ADR stage and cued him with beeps, and he has headphones on, and he did, I mean, I can't do his monkey voice. And he did it literally sync to picture for every little beat in the movie. And I'll never forget Frank Marshall, our producer, coming in to sort of look in on the session, and you can still hear it in the original recordings. You can hear Frank laughing his butt off, seeing a human being voicing this monkey for this very real movie. That's a really fond memory.
So when you're going to take on Raiders of the Lost Ark and you're 25 years old, are you in a situation where you're too young and dumb to be scared or like intimidated?
Yeah, I'll tell you how young and dumb I was. So I also cut the gunfight in the Raven Bar, which was it was the first gunfight I had ever cut. And I had spent a lot of time on. I did a bunch of clever things, like I choreographed the scene to give it a sort of an unspoken believability, and that was this. We knew that Indy was pinned in a corner, and we knew there were like 5 Nazis. One had a submachine gun, another had a Mauser, another had a Luger pistol. And so I did my research and found out, well, the Luger had 6 rounds in the clip. The Schmeiser could probably expend about 3 seconds of full clip shooting before it's... So I plotted, when you're on Indy and you'd see some shots, I figured out, well, it hits from here, so that character's over there. So he's used 3 rounds. And so I just plotted it out like that gun is going to run out of ammo here, so we can't hear from that gun for 5 seconds. Now so this must be that gun. And so I did this beautiful choreography, and I was really pleased with myself, and the scene came out really good. In our first temp dub, I remember going out, we were at the old it was still Sam Goldwyn Studios at that time, and they had a very popular sound department there. I was sitting out on the curb with Ben. Ben had come down to review the mix and see what we'd done. And he said to me, Mark, you know, you did a nice job with the bar fight, but the gunshots don't sound quite right. They don't sound like the guns that I sent you. Because he had made these gorgeous gunshots. And I said, too dumb to know any better. Well, I didn't like those, so I put in these other guns from my library. To Ben Burt. Because I was too dumb to know any better. And Ben said, well, did you decode the Dolby noise reduction? You know, they all have Dolby A-type on the tape. And I said, what's that?
Oh, boy.
So I went back and recut. I retransferred all those guns and recut the entire gunfight with the proper gunshots. And I took out the really cheesy ones that I had put in.
That's amazing. It's always something kind of special, that point in our career where we start feeling like we know what we're doing, but we still don't really know what we're doing, you know? And you start making those mistakes and you get humbled again real quick.
Humility, that's a really vital topic, and I would argue that I think we always have to check ourselves to make sure we don't think we know everything, because this is my 50th year making sound for movies, and I feel like the joy in what I do is constantly discovering. And I try to bring an attitude of, I have something to learn on this one. And in fact, it's been kind of my MO, my personal MO, which is every film that I do, even if it's a rom-com where all I have to do is put in the door closes and the Foley, I try to create a challenge in it to conquer a new tool. Maybe I want to try a new plug-in, or I want to try a new editing technique that I learned from somebody, so that every film is always a process of discovery and education.
I think that you can tell when you're working with someone right away if they have that attitude of let's learn together, or I'm here to tell you what to do.
I got to tell you a story about that. My friend Lee Gilmore, one of the great sound editors, now supervising sound editor, and he's having a fabulous career. I did Blade Runner and Dune Part 1 with him as a great sound designer, contributor to the film. And I always look forward to the moments when I love to give sound editors and sound designers I work with agency, which is to say, I give them a good idea of what I want them to do, and I usually provide sounds I've designed, and I've some pulls from the library. But I always say, this is where I want to go, but if you have a better idea, I want to know about it and I want to hear it. And so I always look forward to that first playback, which I know is anxiety-producing for them and for me. So I remember one time walking in to Lee's room on it took till Dune Part 1 for him to tell me something very personal. He said, you know, Mark, I love these moments, you and I, when we look at my work, because when you like something, you praise it. But when you don't like something, you always say the same thing. You always say, Well, that's interesting.
That's a good way to do it, yeah.
I think so.
We'll get to the next nomination.
We're never going to get through 21.
We might not get through them
never
all.
will.
But something that I wanted to ask you about is that when I started in the industry in the 90s, I don't think anyone would use the word sound community, the community of people doing sound. It seemed more like it was a bunch
use it
of...
constantly.
Well, now we use it all the time. I think it's very much part of the lexicon. I definitely use it.
I have been using that word community for as long as I can remember, including the 80s, because my perception in the 80s was that I was lucky to live in a community, what I felt was a community that was very collegial. I mean, even in the 80s, when I I knew I was bidding against a Wiley Stateman or a Dane Davis or something like that, and arguably they're my enemies. But I found that when I went to the Golden Reels or another, gathering, of an Editors Guild gathering or something, we were all very collegial. Like, how you doing? Oh, I loved your work and that. Or at least that's the way I was. And I always felt like we kind of respected each other and had some kind of unspoken support for us because ultimately we were all part of a very repressed community. And so, bonding in our fight against the man, if you will, the man being the studio, the budget, the producer, we all had this sort of common enemy that we could identify with. And I always found that was a great way of sort of coming together and being able to talk about it. And I still feel that way. I mean, even today, when I go to the Golden Reels, we get that great hour and a half of cocktails beforehand. That's a chance to mingle with our community. And I feel like I can't get enough conversations in. Yeah. There's always somebody tapping me on the, hey, man, I haven't seen you since 3 Men and a Baby, or, some crazy movie we worked on. And then you catch up. And to me, that's always such a joy.
If you are a regular listener to Tonebenders, you've heard me mention the O-Mini miniature omnidirectional microphones from Chris Trevino. I've talked about how I love the neutral frequency response and how they are ultrasonic capable, allowing me to really bend and shape and have a lot of fun with my recordings in post-production. Each pair of mics is handmade by Chris Trevino, a practicing field recordist and a really engaged member of the sound community. He uses high-quality components and puts a lot of work into making and testing each mic to ensure they live up to his own high standards. The O-Minis are available in both XLR and 1/8-inch versions to accommodate any kind of recorder you might have. Between their compact form and robust build quality, they work great with a variety of workflows, from everyday carry recording kits to expeditions where every gram counts and you want to keep your pack weight light. Maybe my favorite thing about both versions of the O-Minis is the price. They are extremely affordable. At $130 American for the plug-in power stereo pairs and $150 for XLR pairs, they offer a lot of value. I suggest you give them a try. At this price point, it is a no-brainer. To learn more, head to chrisatrevino.com/store or click on the link in the description of this episode in your podcast app. We go from your first nomination, which was a win for Raiders of the Lost Ark, to your next one, which is another all-time classic, Poltergeist.
Oh, God, what an amazing movie that was.
And what was your role on that one?
Well, so here, Richard Anderson, Stephen Hunter Flick, and I had formed this company without an actual written manifesto or mission statement. We all had this sort of unspoken commitment to doing everything together. We literally did everything together. When we recorded, we went out to the field together. When we edited, we divided up a movie from like Raiders on. Raiders was our first movie as a company. We just assumed that, okay, you'll take a third of it, I'll take a third of it, blah, blah, blah. And sometimes somebody chose a sound design project and they took on one aspect of it, but somebody else would design another aspect of it. So, and that's what we did on Poltergeist as well. Like, who's going to design the ghosts? Who's going to design the scary ambiences? Who's going to cut reel one? And we just assumed we would do everything collectively and together. And that sense of community was really beautiful. So, for example, starting with Raiders, but Poltergeist was really the first one where Ben did a lot of the recording for Raiders, But on Poltergeist, we recorded everything new. We were out in the field every night, every weekend, even though we weren't getting paid. And we were just constantly building it. But we were building a collective library. We saw everything we did as a collective. And that's one of the reasons why our company, I think, succeeded as much as it did, is that we didn't, like maybe other companies, kind of hoard the sounds that Mark recorded or Steve recorded or Richard recorded. We did it communally. So we all had access to this ever-growing asset that was fresh recordings for all the films that, because eventually we got so successful. I mean, Stephen and Richard got nominated for an Oscar for Poltergeist. Then we exploded. Then we were getting offers everywhere. And we realized if we really want to succeed financially, which was never a goal, and we got to talk about the financial side of it, we have to split up. Now we have names for ourselves. Mark can supervise on his own. Richard, not that they couldn't. I was the young kid that didn't have a reputation. They had been established supervisors in Hollywood, and I was in Poltergeist in 1982, only 26 years old and only in Hollywood for 5 years or 6 years. So we just did everything together. Where was I going with that?
Well, do you want to talk about making money, the part where you had to separate? Like still the same company, but take on different projects within it,
we
right?
had committed to doing everything together, and we did a number of movies together. So, for example, right after Raiders, we felt like we just full of piss and vinegar. Like, God, look at Richard won an Oscar, Ben won an Oscar. We did this amazing film, and everybody knows us now. And so we started getting offers right away, and we got an offer. The very next movie between Raiders and Poltergeist was Pennies from Heaven, a deeply flawed drama that starring Steve Martin, who did an extraordinary job in his first dramatic role that audiences could not accept. The movie itself is very good. His performance is amazing, but audiences couldn't accept him. Every preview, he'd say a line and the audience thought it was a setup for a gag with a payoff, but it wasn't. So they'd titter, and then there was no payoff, and the movie failed miserably. I'm telling that story because to get that job, we had to incorporate. We had to actually become a corporation. Now, none of us were business guys. We were all just creatives. So we hired lawyers and accountants, and we formed a corporation only because we had to. MGM said that the only way we could work on an MGM movie was if we invoiced for our labor. We couldn't go on payroll because our salaries were higher than the salaries of the sound editors in their department. And they couldn't, in fairness, do that to their employees. So they forced our hand to become a business, which we didn't want to do. We just wanted to be gypsies floating around. Hey, we'll rent some rooms, we'll rent some moviolas. But they forced us to form a company. And the minute we started making money, we started spending it. We'd buy a Nagra, we'd buy microphones, we'd buy a synthesizer, and we never thought about money. And in fact, in the 22 years of what was first Thunder Tracks Limited, then Screaming Lizard Productions, then Weddington Productions, we never had a financial mandate. In fact, Stephen and Richard and I never talked about money except for, the studio didn't pay our invoice, so how are we going to make payroll this week? So we never really thought about money, and we never had a profit motive, not once. And I'm really proud of that.
Yeah.
We formed a company as much as anything to facilitate our creative needs. So, for example, we used to make so much money on sound transfer. In those days, all your masters were on quarter-inch. Digital hadn't even been invented yet. And you sent your tapes into a transfer bay to copy them to Magstripe so you could edit. That's the media you edited from. And that was a huge moneymaker. And we used to send out our quarter-inch to independent facilities. And it cost a fortune, and it took a long time to get your transfers back. Sometimes you weren't first in the queue, and I'm cutting reel 1, and I need those gunshots, but I might not get them for 2 days. I had to wait 2 days to edit the scene. And so we bought a transfer bay, not to make money, but to give us the creative freedom so that we could get transfers immediately the minute we wanted them, and we could do custom versions of them with slowdown and funny stuff in the recording chain. And so our first, if you can believe this, our first transfer bay operator is the immortal Doug Hempel, one of the greatest re-recording mixers of all time. And Doug, you can imagine, Doug, I mean, just this amazing genius of sound, being the person operating that equipment. He was also did dual duty for our company. He was out in the field recording for us when we couldn't go do it. Doug built the bones, the foundations of our library for years before he left the company. So we had these amazing assets at our fingertips. I got to tell you a great story about Poltergeist. This story doesn't get told often enough. Richard Anderson and Ben Burt won Oscars for Raiders of the Lost Ark, and here I am. I'm 25 years old, and I don't know who the Academy is. I don't know the rules, and the rules were then, as they are now, a maximum of 2 individuals can win an Oscar for sound editing. We had a sound editing Oscar back in those days. We don't anymore, which I rue. That's another podcast. Cut to Poltergeist, and we did everything equally. Sound design, sound editing, you name it, everything equally. And that was a discussion we had had. And yet the Academy had these rules. And so imagine my disappointment when I saw in Variety a full page for your consideration, Richard Anderson and Stephen Hunter flick. And I didn't understand it. And I asked Richard about that, and he said, "Oh, yeah, I'm really sorry. Frank Marshall, our producer, had to fill out this form called the green sheet, and it only allows 2 names. So Frank put our names in, and that's who got submitted. Yeah, you're right. You should have been considered." And I said kind of naively, "Is there anything we can do?" And Richard said, this is not an exact quote, Richard said, "Yeah, well," this is my Richard Anderson impression. "Yeah, well, I won on the last one, so you should get nominated on this one. I'm going to call the Academy and take my name off of the nomination."
Wow.
What human being in life would remove themselves from a nomination and a potential win? But Richard Anderson is that kind of human being. And I love him. I mean, he's still my partner in my sound library. We've been partners for 48 years. And the sort of magnanimousness of that, you don't see every day. And I had to call that. I got to say that out loud so people know the kind of man Richard Anderson is.
That's why you've been a partner with him for 48 years,
Yeah. Oh, my God.
Yeah. That kind of thing pays off in the long run with relationships and friendships in the long run. It's great to hear that.
Yeah. Can we keep going on Poltergeist?
Definitely.
So I was assigned what we call the closet beast, this white, furry kind of creature from beyond that bursts out of the closet and tries to scare Jo Beth Williams off to not come into the room where Carol Ann has been subsumed. I started recording animals as fodder for that, as we do, as sound designers do. Actual animal recordings are a great starting point to make creature sounds because you'll slow them down and twist them and do sort of fun stuff with them. So I had recorded some really tremendous lions and tigers that I found to be the best, and pumas that had turned out to be really great fodder and is, in fact, the sound of the closet beast in Poltergeist. But something else happened. We did the first temp dub, and I called the music editor and said, "Hey, who is putting in the MGM lion roar at the beginning of the movie? Is that your job or mine? I don't know whose tracks it's supposed to live in." And the music editor said, "I don't know." So I called MGM Post, and they sent over the track they've been sending over for 40 years. It's a mono, optically recorded lion recording that's been placed on the shot of Leo doing his 3 roars. And I put it in the track. I thought, this sounds awful. Now remember, this is 1982. We're in the very beginnings of Dolby Stereo. We're getting high-fidelity soundtracks out in theaters, in the masses, finally. And I thought, Richard and Stephen and I have just spent 6 months recording everything fresh, no library sounds, brand new recordings, and then we have that starting our movie.
Yeah.
So I thought, I'm going to try something. So I took the lion recordings that I had made, and I tried fitting them to the MGM lion, and they didn't fit. It sounded really, really weak. It's interesting. When lions roar, when you see the big open mouth, what that really sounds like is a big yawn. It sounds like, not what a tiger does, which is, so I cut tigers for the MGM lion, and I put them in. At the first temp dub, Stephen heard it and said, "I love that. That's great. What did you guys do?" And I said, "Well, I got to tell you, It's not a real lion. These are tiger roars, but they sound so much better than lion roars. And he said, that's great, we're using it. And MGM liked it so much that they remastered the head of Poltergeist, that MGM lion roar, and that became, and still is, their logo. Their lion is a tiger for the subsequent 45 years.
That's awesome. You didn't ask them for permission to change the
I
Sonic
did not.
logo.
I did
You
not.
Just did it. Wow.
Look.
But they were happy with it.
They were happy with it, but I think there's a meta discussion here which will take us off track, which is I think that's part of our job. I think it's part of our job to present ideas. And in fact, I would argue that I get hired by the filmmakers I get hired by because they expect me to offer my new and fresh ideas. That's why they want me on the movie, not for me to be a cipher, but they want to hear what I have to offer to the soundtrack. So I think that's really important. And there's a difference between insisting you use the tiger roar or the lion or whatever it is, or recommending or saying, hey, here's an idea. What do you think? Then you get pushback. And now you start down the road of what is, I think, a vital process in any creative endeavor where you collaborate with other creative people, which is the push and pull that you do. You know, I really like that, Mark, but what if we do it this way? Let's modify it like that. Great, I'll try that. You go back, hey, you know what? I did that, but then I tried this. What do you think? And so you're pushing and pulling, and eventually you arrive at something that's really good through experimentation. I think it's a great way to explain the way my process works. But it doesn't happen if you aren't being assertive, which is very different than being aggressive.
Mm-hmm. That's an excellent, I haven't heard it worded quite like that. That's very good. So we'll move on. Your next one was The Explorers in 1985.
For Joe Dante, yeah. You skipped over Gremlins, because Explorers came after Gremlins.
Well, were you nominated for Gremlins?
Oh, I'm sorry, you're talking about the ones. How did I not get nominated for Gremlins?
That is ridiculous now that we bring that up.
Can we talk about
Let's talk about Gremlins.
We'll
get you a retroactive nomination for Gremlins.
No, listen, we were talking about the MPSE, so Explorers was my second film with Joe because Gremlins had gone really, really, really well and everybody was really happy. And Joe, to his credit, a visionary filmmaker in 1983, put me on 9 months before the mix at a time when studios told directors, post happens in post.
Yeah.
You have to finish the shoot before you start these people. And Joe knew that we had to develop the gremlin voices way before. And so he did the same on Explorers, allowing me to go off and experiment and just record crazy things. And what's the voice of Whack? What's the sound of his spaceship? And what's the bubble around it sound like? And what's the sound of an idyllic neighborhood in suburban America? So Joe empowered me to just try stuff, do crazy things.
Well, speaking of spaceships, your next nomination is for Star Trek: The Voyage Home.
Oh, right. Oh, man. I remember being told that I was up against two other big-name supervisors. And I remember thinking, I want this film really bad. Because I had worked on the first Star Trek, the motion picture, which I didn't get a credit on. And I was determined to get this film. And I remember developing what would become an MO for me, which is research the director's films, understand the material, read the script, go into an interview where you know more than they do about their own movie. And I even started exercising more. I wanted to be like smart and fit and glowing and on point for that interview. And it paid off. I got the film.
For the first Star Trek, the motion picture?
Star Trek 4.
Yeah, but when you were on the first one, you were sound editing.
No, I was the ADR editor.
Okay.
Another thing, I got to go back to that.
Okay.
Because I was trained, I left Hanna-Barbera as a sound editor and I took a demotion to assistant because I wanted to work in live action. I wanted to work on real movies. And I got an interview at Paramount and they put me in the ADR department. And I apprenticed under Sean Hanley, the head of their ADR department. They had like 10 ADR editors in the department. And Sean was so generous and he mentored me for several months until... I'm glad we got here because this is something I've been meaning to do for over 45 years. Sean was extraordinarily generous with me. He introduced me to everybody at Paramount. He introduced me to Richard Anderson, who was the supervising sound editor, and Stephen Hunter Flick. And it would come to pass that Sean would get very, very ill, and he had to leave the movie and not come back. And when he went to Bob Wise, the Robert Wise of, The Day the Earth Stood Still, The Sound of Music, Robert Wise, who I didn't know from Adam, and said, I have to leave the film. And Bob said, who's going to replace you? He said, take the kid.
Wow.
There were 9 other men in that department, all with much more seniority and experience, but Sean had faith in me. And I wasn't a very good ADR editor, but he recommended me. And from that, my career changed forever. I met Richard Anderson and Stephen Hunter Flick. I worked with Robert Wise. I worked on the biggest movie of the year. And, Richard and Stephen and I would form a corporation the next year. And the reason I'm telling this story is for the opportunity in public to say, thank you, John Hanley. You changed my life. And I never got a chance to thank you for it because you passed away before I had a chance to come to you and say, that meant everything to me. And so please put this in the interview because I know his sons are still alive and maybe this will mean something to them. But John changed the arc of my life forever because of that act of generosity.
It's interesting that we can look back, hindsight is 20/20, and pinpoint these moments where our whole lives changed. You don't realize it at the time, obviously.
I didn't, and I feel so selfish about that. I can't believe I like to think of myself as a generous and thoughtful person. But at the time, it all happened in this sort of continuum. It only is with hindsight when I look back and I think how grateful I am for everything that I have. None of this would be here. I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be talking to you if it weren't for that act of kindness from John. I didn't know it at the time, but I should have. I should have at least acknowledged to him that he recommended me to Robert Wise. That's unbelievable. No sane human being would do that. They would have recommended the other guy with the most seniority who could, definitely do the job. Mm-hmm. So thanks for that opportunity. I'm so glad that it came up that way. But that came up because we're talking about explorers, right? Mm-hmm. Do we have to give that to
Star Trek. I think
we're not back to Star Trek 4. Oh, my God. Again, another visionary director. Leonard Nimoy put me on 9 months before the mix, and we started designing sounds. And Leonard did something that I had never seen another director do. The most important sound in the film was the sound of the probe, this giant spaceship that comes from another galaxy through time to save the whales. And that was, the theme of our film, Save the Whales. Leonard was an incredible bleeding heart liberal, as I, and we believed in this mission. Anyways, so Leonard thought that the sound of this spaceship was so vital that it needed to be designed not in post, not in the director's cut, not just in production, but before production so that he could play it on the set. And you know why? What he wanted to do was to be able to have the sound, this amazing sound, play it over speakers on the set. And this is what he did so that he could get individual reactions from the cast hearing it for the first time. Because if you remember the beat in the movie, Uhura says something like, I have it on blah, blah, blah. Kirk says, put it on screen. Let's hear it. And then you cut to Uhura and Scotty and Kirk, and you see the reactions. Those reactions are a function of listening to this goofy sound I made played back on set. Who does that? Who plays a sound effect on set to get a reaction shot from an actor? Brilliant. And my whole relationship with Leonard went like that for my 9-month experience on Star Trek. And that would be my first Oscar nomination and my first MPSE win was for Star Trek 4, and I was really, really proud of that.
MPSE win as a supervisor.
As a supervisor, exactly right. Yeah, but man, there's a million stories from Star Trek. This is a visual. Another brilliant, brave idea of Leonard's, which is what happened in the finished film, was this. He wanted the apotheosis, the meeting of the probe with the whales, where they communicate and they solve the problems of whaling and man's inhumanity to the planet, and they commune. And that's the dramatic climax of our film. And then we have the denouement, and everybody's happy, and they fly off in warp speed. Leonard said to me in our first meeting, Mark, that's all on you. There's going to be no score there, and there's going to be no dialogue. I want you to create the sounds of the probe communicating with the whales and the whales communicating back to the probe, and it's got to feel good because this is the end of our movie, and we have to have a catharsis from the audience. And I thought, oh, no problem. No big dun, 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 dun. You know, it's all on me with kind of squawky whale sounds. And that's exactly what we did. And so I designed those sounds for months. But after he gave me that pitch, I had a private meeting with Harv Bennett, our executive producer, who was the executive producer of these films for a long time. And Harv gave me his pitch. He said, now, Mark, here's what's going to happen. It's all on you. Leonard told me about this. It's all on you. It's all going to be sound. And so he put his two arms up in front of me, and he made his hands in the forms of finger puppets. I don't know, am I describing it verbally?
Yeah.
Like his fingers and his thumbs are opening and closing like a mouth, like on a Beanie and Cecil puppet, right? Or even a Muppet.
Yeah.
And he proceeded to walk me through what that conversation might be like. And he literally did this. Here I'm in a producer's office on Paramount Studios lot, and he goes, hi, I'm the probe. I have something to tell you. And then the other hand opens and he goes, hi, we're the humpback whales. What do you want? We're here to solve your problem. Why don't you just do this? And the whales say, gee, thanks so much for the advice. We're going to do that. Thank you very much. Goodbye. And he literally, not mime. Well, he did mime the conversation with his hands. And that was his way of describing how this was supposed to work. You know, call and response, call and response, call and response.
That's awesome.
It's a weird moment.
Okay, we're going to pause the talk there. Part 2 will be coming out in just a few days, so please make an effort to give it a listen as well. In that part of the interview, Mark will break down more films that he's been nominated for a Golden Reel on over the course of his career, including Aladdin, The Green Mile, Inner Space, Mad Max Fury Road, Dune, some of the documentaries he's worked on, and his upcoming film directed by Werner Herzog. Big thanks to Erica and the whole team at Formosa for letting us use their beautiful Stage 6 mix room at their Hollywood location. Please make sure to get your tickets so you can be there when Mark accepts his Lifetime Achievement Award at the Motion Picture Sound Editors Golden Reel Awards coming up on March 8th. The awards start at 3 p.m. at the Wilshire Ebell Theater in Los Angeles. Legendary producer Kathleen Kennedy will be getting the Filmmaker Award, and this past year's best-sounding films will be represented by the amazing sound artists that brought them to life. Patton Oswalt will be hosting, and dinner will be after the awards are given out. Tickets can be purchased now until February 25th by going to mpse.org. And remember, Motion Picture Sound Editor members get a sweet $150 off their ticket price. If you're planning to be in Los Angeles for the awards, consider coming a few days early on Thursday, March 5th to go to the 4th annual Tonebenders LA Sound Design Meetup sponsored by the Motion Picture Sound Editors. This is a great night where you can hang out with old friends and colleagues and meet a bunch of new ones. Everybody that works in sound for movies, series, and games is welcome and encouraged to come. Last year, we kind of outgrew the previous venue, and we've now moved it to all-season brewing this year. I hope you can make it. It was a lot of fun last year, even though we were packed in pretty tight. This year should be even better with a bit of elbow room. Please feel free to tell anyone you think might be interested in coming out. Keep your ears out for part 2 of the Mangini interview coming out in a few days. Thanks for listening, everybody. My name's Tim Muirhead. I'll talk to you soon. If you work in sound design, post, or game audio, you already know how much time the right library can save you. For the month of February, get 50% off any Sound Ideas membership tier, no matter which level of access you need. That's half off of the entire professionally recorded sound effects catalog, from cinematic and broadcast to hard-to-find specialty sounds. Just head to sound-ideas.com and use the promo code TONEBENDERS50 at checkout. Tonebenders is produced by me, Timothy Muirhead. Theme music is by Jim Guthrie. You can reach me via email through info@tonebenderspodcast.com. Follow Tonebenders on Instagram to stay on top of new episodes. If you like the show, you can help us out by spreading the word to your friends and colleagues, or leave us a tip. Just go to tonebenderspodcast.com and click support.